you need a buyer and a seller in economic activity. And AI might help you produce stuff. It doesn't buy anything from you. So that's a one-sided economy.
Welcome to the Sales Made Simple podcast. This podcast is dedicated to helping overwhelmed outdoor living professionals, landscapers, and hardscapers just like you increase your closing rate to over 75% without doubling your workload so you can build a seven-figure business that doesn't need you. I'm your host, Joshua Gillow. Let's dig in. Hey everybody, welcome back. This week I have Greg Crabtree back on the podcast. He comes in here a couple times a year to give us an update on what's going on in the world. And there's a lot of changes going on in Washington, a lot of stuff, things like tariffs and clients that are scared to spend money and all those wonderful ththings that we're running into out there when we're trying to sell these outdoor living projects. So I wanted to bring him on so we can have a better insight into what he's seeing in the market right now and even give us a good idea of what the next 3 to 6 months could look like. So Greg, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
Absolutely. So tell me about what you're seeing out there in this crazy world. I mean, the first 100 days of Trump here has been nothing but impressive. Let's put it that way. So question is, how's it impact our customers and how's it going to impact our businesses?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the assessment of, we're right at the first 100 days and, you've got people that are, writing articles talking about, oh, it's been a disaster. Well, it's certainly been different. And what Trump has tried to do is do a lot of stuff in such a compressed period of time, a lot of it by executive order. And those are the kind of things that just open, for a lot of chaos, a lot of, pushback from the court systems. And we've seen all those things. And so, and really my clients I've fielded calls practically every day, text in the middle of the night, people worried to death. How do I do this? How do I make a decision? And it's like, there's not really an answer of guessing because we've seen tariffs turned on, tariffs turned off. I don't think Trump has the political capital to really hold out a whole lot longer unless we see some breakthroughs in, major trade negotiations. So that's kind of one thing, on the calendar. Now, for your audience, I wouldn't worry too much about that because everybody that we see in your industry, there's only a handful of things that could affect you in the landscaping arena. Chemicals, do have a source in China for the most part in the landscape industry, but probably not too many in the way of materials. And so I think from your industry standpoint, what you guys would want to be worried about is basically just the economy really going into a stuck mode and everybody pulls back from spending. Mm-hmm. Right now, everybody's still spending, and so, and especially home improvement projects are pretty strong. We're seeing it. Our masterminds in the renovation industry group are all having pretty good summers. They've got a pretty strong backlog, and the issue, and this kind of feeds into the landscape, hardscape, all of those type of projects, that your listeners would be doing. People are still spending money to fix up the house that they live in because they can't really sell it because they can't afford the mortgage to move someplace else. And so we have this insatiable desire to keep up the place that we live in. And since we can't really economically afford, and that doesn't seem to be on the horizon anytime soon, of interest rates falling enough to where there's a lot of new home or existing home resales. So I think from that standpoint, you're really only going to be affected, I think, if we just get into a big downturn. Now, our read of the economy is this. I mean, of the 100 companies that we track that are our clients all over the country, all different industries, it gives us kind of our basket of, kind of the simple numbers take on the economy. We still see the economy as relatively flat. I mean, if you really, our models are showing about 6% revenue increase this year over last year for the last 12 months. That probably equates to about a 0 to negative 2% GDP. And it's a hard number to calculate. Nobody knows it perfectly. But our sense would be it's about flat to negative 2%. But thing is, everybody's got a job that wants a job. So is that a bad thing? And I think for core industries like your listeners, that there's always a thing for them to do, they're going to be pretty stable. Now, it's, to roll out your shingle and decide to open a new business into this market might be one of the tougher times we've ever seen. But for the established people, that's going to look pretty good. And really, as I've talked about in previous podcasts, we're in a period of the economy where you're trying to go get market share, not actually ride the wave of market growth. Because we just don't see, unless you're just in a unique area where there is a lot of growth because people moving in, but those are getting fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer, across the country. But talk to one of my clients in the Midwest, that's in your industry, and in his case, what we've really looked at doing as a strategy is to expand open a new location that's kind of a satellite location at first, but just kind of grow it slowly. But he pretty much can open it up, because in his case, what he's looking at is the market that he's in. It's kind of winding down in the area where his original store was, but it's picking up in another area in his region. And so the idea is both should operate, quite well. But that's a case in his case, what he's doing is he's making a market share play because he needed physical location, in another part, of the area. And that really made his operations much more efficient, because there's a point for your bigger clients, they get so big. To grow bigger doesn't really help you. It actually makes you a lot less profitable. And so sometimes you have to break apart, that business and, put them in different, if geography is your challenge, is labor is your challenge, is the customer base your challenge. So sometimes you've got to think laterally, about your business, as it expands.
No, I love that. It's great. And I guess it's to the old adage, if you're hunting one area and you don't have enough, livestock, if you will, or animals to knock down and feed the village, then you need to go elsewhere to look for it too, right? So
it is. It is.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to be willing to move. You got to be willing to adapt. And as we've seen, also, you got to be willing to move away from, as we've talked about, narrow, be focused, be focused. Now we're seeing more businesses consider adding things that helps cover their existing overhead. So if I can add a particular service offering, product offering that helps carry me through my slower periods, and helps cover that overhead, and might add some stability where project work turns on and turns off. Now, the other thing that we really push people in the project world is, you've got to be really tight on what can you turn up when the demand is there and what can you turn down when the demand is not. And in a tight labor market, it's just not as easy to turn it on and turn it off. But there's just other things that you got to look at to say, okay, can I subcontract out this piece of it, but I do this piece?
That's right.
All those different kinds of strategies. And also the one that I've seen more often of late in an expansion strategy is, okay, I've got this temporary spurt of demand. Well, don't go add permanent overhead to go reach it, subcontract with somebody else, partner with somebody else, until you know that that's permanent demand before you start adding, into your infrastructure, and know that's going to repeat on a regular basis.
Absolutely. No, I love that tip for sure. I know when I started out, it was always, oh, look, there's more things to do. I can go buy that piece of equipment. I can go buy that truck, right?
Yeah.
And it's the excitement of like, oh, I can have more toys. The problem
That's
is
right.
that 6 months, a year, 2 years later, all of a sudden, you don't need it anymore. And it just sits there collecting dust. You're like, oh crap, I still got payments on that thing, right?
Yeah,
So to expand through the use of other subcontractors till you get a good ground and a good footing, that makes perfect sense. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's always tough. The entrepreneur always has the, more often they have the glass half full mindset of, oh, this growth will continue. I just go back to my chicken farmer roots and say, listen, people still haven't answered me this question of going, if you have a relatively flat to declining total population, a relatively flat to declining total workforce, how do you have an expanding economy? And so now, there again, of what's there, everybody's employed, everybody's busy. So on that aspect of it, it's good. It's even better, because in the periods past where we had an expanding economy, we still had excess labor. that if you had any slowdown, the R word, the recession word, is a bad thing. If Even if we are in a recession at the moment, okay, so what? I mean, like I said, everybody's got a job. There's nobody in a food line somewhere, that
Hmm.
can't get work. There's people that can't get the job they want because things may have shifted. But if you're willing to work, you can make a pretty good paycheck. And I still worry. The one thing that I will say that does affect your listeners' industry significantly too, though, is also access of what I call the hands labor. The Trump administration has been relatively silent about addressing the need for those outdoor workers, who get stuff done, and then many times at a super high rate of productivity. They have floated a couple of ideas about if you're here illegally and working, you can get an employer sponsor and you have to leave the country and then come back. But those have all just been kind of trial balloons that they've been floating. But the last number that I had heard, I was reading an article within the last 2 weeks, and they estimated that there's 18 million undocumented workers. These are not criminals. These are good people that are super high producing, and they're consumers as well. And just think about it. I mean, you can't take 18 million people out of the economy and that are consumers and producers. I mean, that is a big, big, big number. And so I think from that standpoint, that's one to keep a close eye on, because if we don't address it soon, I think the demand of the summer work that's building, as we're seeing, like I said, our clients in your industry have pretty good backlogs at the moment.
Mm.
Well, as the summer builds and and there's any decline of those available workers, and certainly there's nobody coming across the border of any degree at the moment, and so there's going to be a shortage of that hands labor, and we could see another $5 an hour spike easily, in that wage base, where we went from probably 13 to 18 in 21, and we could easily go from 18 to 20 up to 25.
Got it.
And
Okay.
that part, and you just be prepared if you have to pay up for it. You got to build that into your quote base and all those things. But right now, the labor seems to be there for the demand that's there. But I think it's going to get tight by the middle of the summer.
Got it. That actually leads right into my next question. So, what do you think the next 3 to 6 months look like? What are you predicting at this point? I know you don't know for sure, nobody does, but
Yeah.
what are you guys thinking?
There's a lot of things being floated, and that seems to be the way of the world right now, is people float stuff and ideas, and then you come back and fix it. And Trump just has a faster cycle of that, than we've probably seen. At the end of the day, I think the tariffs will have to come back down, whether we have a trade deal or not. And so, if we can get a trade deal, great. If we can't get trade deals, we could see really bad stuff happening in the economy. If there's not some type of settlement, across the board in that. I do think we're going to start feeling those vestiges of labor shortage. I don't think, Trump's floated a lot of ideas, and especially some of them even as early as late as yesterday, about, using tariffs to offset taxes. I'm in the
Hmm.
camp that math doesn't work. I mean, it can offset it some, but it can't offset it that much. And it's just a different world now than the period of time that they're using to base those ideas off of. And so I don't know. I think from a tax policy standpoint, we're going to get kind of the 2017 Act just extended, for the most part. I don't think there's going to be any major tax cuts or any major tax increases from what we did. Now, those a lot of those provisions in the 2017 Act are expiring this year, so they have to get something done. And if those things expire, taxes go up, and you lose the ability to rapidly deduct things and all that kind of stuff. And so there's all kinds of bad stuff that happens if they don't get a deal done. But I don't know that some of the aggressive things that they're talking about, they're going to be able to get done. And we'll just kind of take a wait and see attitude. It's still going to be a roller coaster of, 24-hour news cycles of, ideas, and one side touting success and the other side touting, oh, it's abject failure. And the truth lies somewhere in between. It's neither, at the end of the day. And I think a lot of it is I still don't see the government, business, Wall Street recognizing this big barrier to growth that's in front of us. And I really think, the word for the future is the optimized economy, not the growing economy. Because like I said, until you change birth rate trajectory, tell me how it grows. And everybody always throws out, technology. Well, AI doesn't consume anything. I mean, last time I checked, you need a buyer and a seller in economic activity. And yeah, AI might help you produce stuff, but it doesn't buy anything from you.
Hmm.
So that's a one-sided economy, and that actually could have some bad implications as much as good. So,
That's an interesting
but
perspective.
there
Yeah.
again, I'm just a
Yeah.
chicken farmer from Alabama, so what do I know? So,
So, given the fact that many listeners own their own landscaping, outdoor living, hardscaping businesses, what are some things that we should be thinking about doing in the next 3 to 6 months that'll at least help us, given whatever happens in the future? Maybe there's some old adages that you have, like, "Hey, stick to these three things, and you'll be good to go," or I don't know. What are you thinking?
well, I mean, the two primary things we always tout in simple numbers is number one is you got to get profitable with what you got. If you're not
Hmm.
profitable right now, you're in danger. So
Yep.
don't what's to come is not going to help you get more profitable. So you've got to stick to your guidelines. We want to see that 20% profit to gross margin number. Not, I don't care because of all the pass throughs. It's more about profit to gross margin before any labor is applied. And if you're not at that 20% level, you need to, start pushing harder to get the productivity, trim unnecessary cost, but you really got to get your profit house in order. And then secondarily, you got to get your capital house in order. You got to get your 2 months of cash. You got to be off lines of credit. And because if we do hit a bump in the road and hit a disruption, the banks are not going to be your friend,
Hmm.
during that time frame. They're just as concerned as you are. And and so you need to be self-funded, from that standpoint. And as we've seen for 20 years now that we've been following the standard of the 2 months cash number, it just gives tremendous stability, to businesses in a disruptive time. And don't think the government's going to come out with another PPP program or anything like that to save you. I mean, that was just a once in a lifetime thing that happened during COVID. So you really got to make sure that you're fully capitalized, with your 2 months cash, and you got to be profitable what you got. Then, then it's a question of, just navigating opportunities for growth as you see some of your weaker competitors disappear from the market. You know,
Yeah.
and and I think you're going to see in your industry some of the people that used to feel pretty comfortable that were undocumented doing small projects. There's not going to be somebody available to do those small projects, that the two guys in a truck kind of deal, because a lot of those people don't feel comfortable being out in the open, and all those things. And I think some will continue to self-deport, and move back to their original country. And so that does create a rippling effect in the marketplace. And I think there
Hmm.
probably always, or you've already seen, I think most of your customers would probably say their demand levels at the moment are pretty good. And I think part of it is that, and that there's not people, pulling off the bottom end jobs. And so people are having to go to more and more, the true, active businesses, that do that
Hmm.
kind of work. So on the one hand, that's helpful. On the other hand, it's one of those things that, from the customer side of it, they're going to have to pay up, a little bit more, and some will choose not to do projects just because it's more
Yeah.
expensive than what they could have gotten done before.
No, excellent, excellent. So before we wrap up here, you mentioned about having 2 months of core capital sitting on the side. Can you tell us a little bit more if if the listener just listening for the first time, never really heard that topic of core capital and how to
Mm.
even calculate if they have 2 months of core
Yeah.
capital? How could they easily do that?
Yeah, just look at your monthly expenses that are not your cost of goods. So you're generally going to get terms on your supplies. And so really it's everything that's all your labor and all of your general operating expenses, rent, utilities, office expense, you name it, payroll taxes. I mean, that's the part that you need 2 months worth. So look back at the last 3 months, take an average, kind of what it is, and set that number. it may surprise people who've been living off of a line of credit. They're going, how do I do that? And what we find is in most cases, if you just go through take a 3 to 6 month distribution diet from your business, and quit taking money out of the business and leave it in to get fully capitalized and learn to live, if that number's 100,000, just learn to live that 100,000 as if you have no cash.
Mm.
And and what's funny is once we get businesses to be there, they really love it. And they want
Oh yeah.
to, and sometimes they start lobbying. Well, maybe I need 3 months.
Mm.
No, you just
Yes.
need two. And 3 months is excess cash.
Yep.
But that's a critical concept that I think really helps a lot of businesses, stay healthy, and they can take a shot to the gut, for a month or two, and get through it and not have to do extraordinary things financially, to stay in business.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. You guys have taught us that, and it's been such a powerful concept to know that we have, 2+ months of core capital in place. It takes the
Hmm.
pressure of survival off. Gives you a little bit more of a thriving mentality, and you start making decisions based on
Yeah.
knowing you have like some backing, some foundation. I know for most
Yeah.
of the years in business, I didn't even know what that was. I'm like, just squirrel some money away, maybe
Hmm.
20 grand or whatever. And then I was like, well, that went through really quick when we have a really lean month or a really lean
Yeah.
quarter. I'm like, holy crap, that disappeared like nothing. So having this concept, understanding what those numbers truly are,
Hmm.
and then being able to have that money sitting away in an account that you don't touch, knowing that it's the rainy day fund, not thinking you're going to go to a bank. Because I've tried that before, man. I've
Yeah.
got to a point where I was really like, I need money, and I go to a bank, and you're like, we're not giving money out. I'm sorry, everybody needs money right now, and we're not doing it. And I
Yeah.
used to get credit card checks in the mail, right? They give you like the credit card
Mhm.
companies would send these checks, 0% for X. And I would save those things because that was my way out. I'm like, I'm
Yep.
guaranteed money if I
Absolutely.
need it. I would I had a whole entire drawer full of those things and eventually just threw them out. But
Hmm.
having that backup, and I'm like, what if we just took our own money and put it to the side? What if
Yeah.
we had 2, 3, 4, 6 months of core capital sitting there being like, man, we can ride a half a year out because we're
Well,
constantly
and
putting a percentage away.
yeah, and think of it. I mean, one of the reasons why people don't have it is, like I said, they're taking distributions out to live on. And that exposes one of our other big simple numbers tenets is, listen, you got to clear distortions and pay yourself a market-based wage. When you're relying on distributions to live on, you're not at a market-based wage. And once you fix that, you will defend that salary being made every payroll period far more vigorously than you'll defend a bottom line profit. But what happens is once you're paying yourself a market wage and you prove to yourself you can pay that, because you're essentially doing it now if you're taking distributions. I mean, it gets roughly the same number. It's like, no, I mean, and then you really get to focus on true profitability. And that's the reason why all of these things feed off of each other. Yes, I need to be profitable. Oh, I can't get there. It's like, well, yeah, you can. You got to focus on it. And then, oh, I need cash. Well, you don't have a cash problem. You got a profit problem. So let's fix profit. That helps you generate the cash. And then now, I need to keep it in the business until it doesn't need it. And that's not a number that just continues to grow, 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 grow. I mean, it literally almost all the times it's 3 to 6 months, maybe 9 months for somebody to just really stay focused to build that 2 months cash number. And then from that point forward, really, strong stability, from there.
Yeah. And it's also a discipline, right? You've got to be
Mm,
disciplined to give yourself that market wage. And what would it cost to replace you as the CEO or whatever you're doing in the business? And if it's 100 grand,
mm,
let's say, okay, then that's your paycheck. You divide that over however you're going to get paid, and then make sure you get your 2 months core capital in place. And after that, you can, take that money and invest it in the
that's
business
right.
or take it out additional if you want to, but your business is healthy with 2 months
Mm,
core capital. You're getting paid a
yeah,
market-based wage. Now we've got a business, not just grabbing every dollar that comes in. And next thing you know, you're running after the next project to get a deposit so you can pay taxes or you can pay yourself or you can pay payroll. Like that means that's a business that at this point
mm,
is in survival mode, not in thriving. And the difference
yeah,
is massive. And all it is discipline between where they are and where they could go.
yeah. And we'll be on calls with a client that, you know, is they're feeling the need to draw money out of the business for one reason or another.
Yep.
And it'll draw them down below the 2 month number. And, it's one of those things that, they sometimes will go ahead and do it if they're continuously profitable. But the ones that get to that moment of truth that they have to decide what to fix is when they're not as profitable, as they're not at their profit target, and they're wanting to take money out of the business. And
Yeah.
it's like, listen, you got to go fix that profit problem,
Yeah.
because you take this money out, it doesn't grow back because you're not profitable. Go
Yeah.
fix the
It's so,
profit
so important.
problem. You know,
Yep. So important.
that's what creates the cash.
Yep. And profit is the lifeblood of the business, right? Without it,
Hmm.
just like the body, it doesn't survive.
That's
You
right.
can't do that. So if you're not profitable, it's time to get profitable and raise prices or cut costs in order to get
Hmm.
there. And then you can start building all these things. So Greg, always appreciate jumping on with you here. I hope the
Yeah.
listeners got a lot today from this. I know I always do. How can they find you? How can they get engaged if they're like, look, I know I'm not really sure what my core capital is. I don't know how to even figure that out. I'd love to have somebody watching that with me. How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, just go to simplenumberscri.com. That's the website for our practice unit. We're part of a national firm, Carr Riggs and Ingram, but our practice unit, that's our website for our unit. There's a contact form there, and I mean, we're probably about the easiest people to find. If you just Google Simple Numbers or Greg Crabtree, we're there. And so,
Awesome.
so it's one of those things that shouldn't be a challenge for anybody to track us down. So,
And also your book, in case somebody just wants to kind
yeah.
of learn your principles.
I do have a speaker website that'll direct you to the books, gregcrabtree.net. You can go there. That's got some content, especially there for me as a speaker in the books. But both books are on Amazon. So once again, Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, Big Profits is the kind of the first book that we want everybody. It's more the mindset of the entrepreneur about finance that's practical and functional. And then the second book, Simple Numbers 2.0, as you get bigger, I wrote that book for kind of, okay, I want to go deeper. I want to see more practical examples of how to apply these concepts. Then the 2.0 book, really helps people, put it into play on their own.
Love it. Well, Greg, your work has definitely changed my life and the way I look at business. So I always appreciate you and hope the listeners got something today. So guys,
Yeah.
see you next
Thank
week.
you. Anytime.